And the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hello and welcome to the only independent news and opinion program where we chronicle two distinct possibilities, either the demise and possible extinction of the Homo sapien or the greatest leap forward in human history. One thing is certain, there is no status quo. This is the Daily Australian Radio Show, episode number 57 for Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. My name is Jason Olborn, half of this fabulous new news show, and I'd say that because that's the feedback we're getting. Joined now by the other half. Here she is, Nicola Charles. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, listeners. There's that slight, and I really like it, that slight chill in the air in the mornings down here in Australia where we realise we're sort of edging towards autumn, fall if you're in America, and I really appreciate it because it's been quite hot of late, Jason, hasn't it?
We have had the Indian summer of Indian summers. Like, it has been scorching during March. Some of the days sort of 37 degrees hotter than we had in December, January or February even. It's really warm. But what's interesting is by the time we get to Easter every year, it just cools down as if overnight daylight saving ends. And it's almost like it's not a transition, but an absolute adjustment that happens overnight. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's like someone turned off summer.
Literally.
Let's not get conspiratorial about that. Now, I often talk about, before we get into the headlines, I often talk about this fabulous lady on Facebook. Her name's Diana Wheel, and you really should follow her. You should look at her. She writes really great opinion pieces, and she does an awful lot of research. The surname is spelled W-I-E-L, and I just want to read something that's her opinion on what's going on with money and digital money, if that's okay. So I think this is absolutely fascinating. So while the debate rages on over the future threat of central bank digital currencies, a far more insidious reality has already taken hold. Existing financial systems already function as a digital control grid, monitoring transactions, restricting choices, and enforcing compliance through programmable money. And this is something we've all dreaded. Trump's Executive Order 14178 ostensibly bans central bank digital currencies. His administration is quietly advancing stablecoin legislation that would hand digital currency control to the same banking cartel that owns the Federal Reserve. The Stable Act and Genius Act don't protect financial privacy. They enshrine financial surveillance into law, requiring strict KYC tracking on every transaction. If you don't know what KYC means, it's a Bill Gates invention. It's called Know Your Customer. If you put KYC into the internet, it will explain Know Your Customer. It's truly awful. It's what I was talking about yesterday, where, you know, you walk through the doors of Maya and they know everything about you thanks to open source data collection. This isn't, Diana writes, this isn't defeating digital tyranny. I feel it's rebranding it. Currency that contains embedded rules controlling how, when, and where, and by whom it can be used. Health savings accounts, HSAs, these accounts restrict spending to approved medical expenses through merchant category codes programmed into the payment system. Try to buy non-medical items with HSA funds and the transaction is automatically declined. The Doconomy MasterCard, this credit card co-sponsored by the United Nations through its Climate Action SDG, tracks users' carbon footprints from purchases and can shut off access when a predetermined carbon limit is reached or carbon footprint. Electronic benefit transfer, EBT cards. Government assistance programs already use programmable restrictions to control what recipients can purchase, automatically declining transaction for unauthorized products. The Bank Secrecy Act mandates that financial institutions report suspicious transactions, while the Patriot Act expanded these monitoring requirements dramatically. So there's more to that. Go on and read that. Now, Next to that, we've also found out that the digital euro is coming. It's been confirmed. I'm looking at the website right now, EU-digital-identity-wallet. Look that up. And of course, the digital currency creates DIVOC, which stands for Digital Identity Verifiable Open Credentialing. Digital Identity Verifiable Open Credentialing. Flip that around, reverse it. Yes, it spells COVID. Mirrors always tell the truth. And if you go and look this European digital euro up, it says on the 3rd of June 2021, the European Commission adopted a recommendation, Commission Recommendation 946 of the 3rd of June 2021, on a common union toolbox for a coordinated approach towards a European digital identity framework, calling on member states to work closely together with the Commission towards the development of a toolbox, including a technical architecture and reference framework, hereby known as the ARF, a set of common standards and technical specifications, and a set of common guidelines and best practices. Now, what's interesting and why I read that all out, Jason, is all this is going ahead whether we want it to or not, right? So it does seem to be that the war is not are we going to have digital money or are we not going to have digital money, but who's going to control it? Because, of course, if this whole thing, if this whole financial institution, this whole system we've got set up now, the fiat currency system, was not allowed to come in and control this because, you know, things like Bitcoin and, you know, all of those other things were to come in and supersede them as a currency, then this current crop of, you know, quite malevolent bankers would be sort of out of work, essentially. They'd be out of the system. So I'm very concerned, Jason, and you're our Trump guy on the show, that Trump is essentially making sure that the systems we have in place are also going to control this digital money. Any thoughts on that, Jason?
Well, Trump, by pulling back on the CBDC, by saying we're not going to have a central bank digital currency in the US, says that there has to be an element of separation between total control and less of whatever total control is. So if we then look at the Nigerian experiment with central bank digital currencies, it was soundly rejected, no interest whatsoever. So at some point, people are going to say, well, I don't want to be surveilled where I spend my money. So you can't just switch overnight from cash to trackable, traceable currency. And
What if we already are? I mean, we don't know, right? What if, like, I collect antiques, you know, you like cars. What if all of these things that we think are like innocent hobbies and interests that we have, what if they're already part of our social credit score?
Well, they could well be part of some data collection, and you would assume that everything has already been collected. Whether
I
or
mean,
not,
if you're someone who's into porn, Jason, you're in real trouble, right? They know.
well, funny you should say that because it seems to be the one taboo that's no longer a taboo. It's almost spoken about publicly. It's in every Daily Telegraph newspaper. It's on the Kyle and Jackie show every single day.
Of course it is.
You know what I mean? It's almost as if it's the opposite now. Um,
But I
it's
think it's a honey trap, right? What they're doing is this, it's abuse, right? It's normalization. So they're normalizing it because it's a trap, it's a lure, it's a honey trap. You make everyone feel that it's okay to be looking at porn or a swinger. And they were even there for a while, Jason. They were even trying to legitimize pedophilia, right? Because I think they're trying to bring out the worst in all of us so that they know what the worst in all of us looks like. I really do feel that's where we're going.
Look, I think that's a very solid argument. My stance has been the slippery slope of permissiveness. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. I shared on my X yesterday. There's a TikTok video that's being shared around of a little girl. She probably is between maybe 8 and 10 years of age, and she's having a full tattoo on her leg from her
I
knee
saw
to her
that.
thigh.
What's that going to look like when she grows up and her leg stretches? She looks like she might be quite tall. That's going to be the weirdest looking tattoo.
But where did we ever get the idea that a child can be tattooed for a start? Where did that ever become a thing? I remember when neck tattoos first appeared, and I remember making the comment going, Is there a role here for the government to sort of say that there's a limit here to what you can do? If they're telling us certain things, I thought a face tattoo was going to be the absolute limit. Now we have people with full face tattoos, head tattoos. I mean, where does this stop and this trend, or is it something that's just totally an individual's right and desire, and that's it? Could you argue, therefore, at some stage, if a threatening gesture is considered an assault, is is a tattoo on someone's face threatening? I
Well, it's an
thought,
affront, right? I work in sales, and because most of the people at this point who have money to spend are the higher end of town, because the rest of us have been demolished financially, and they're older, right? It's older people who are a more genteel era. You can't walk into a situation where you might be purchasing something and a person's, and I know this, people are probably going to attack me for this, but if they've got like full head and face tattoos and, bones through their noses and those stretched out ear things, you're probably going to either pass on that salesperson and go to someone else, or you're just going to leave and you may no longer be a customer. So from where I'm sitting from a sales standpoint, everyone who's looking customer friendly and welcoming customers in, they don't look like that. So again, I feel this is very pervasive. It's a way to ensure that in the future, those people are going to be removed from the workforce, in essence. It's very dark.
yeah, look, I argue again in another direction. I had a friend in TV, a presenter who had a tattoo on her back. And this is probably 10 years ago. It was just, a little tiny little decorative tattoo that went down her back. And she complained to me that that was the reason why she couldn't get work outside of TV. And I thought that is, it's innocent compared to what I've seen. So that's it's a comparison, isn't it? That you might say that you can't get work, but now it seems that you can go anywhere, and tattoos are the it doesn't matter where you go.
I mean, I
People have
don't
got
mind them. I've got to say, I don't mind them. I've got two. I also have one on my back, and it certainly never stopped me doing television. And I did that thing when you get married of getting one as my wedding ring, right? So I've got one on my hand as well, my finger, very, very small. So I'm not against them. I'm actually a fan of them. But as you say, it's very much like these injections that were in experiments. What right do you have, even as a parent, really? What
mm,
right do you have to assume that a child will want that when it gets past the age of 18? The one on that girl's leg means that every time she wears a swimsuit, every time she wears shorts, and I think she was American, so, it gets quite warm over there, or every time she wears a skirt to go to work, they're going to see that and know. It's weird. And it was weird that they chose to put that all over social media as well. Thought that was very wrong.
well, again, so at what point is it considered abuse? But
Yeah.
the other argument that I've sort of pointed to and hasn't really got any traction was that with our permissive tattooing culture that's sort of emerged over the last 25 years, and I guess it sort of started in when people like Lachlan Murdoch were having tattoos done, it crossed the Rubicon from sailors to businessmen,
It
if
was
you will.
David Beckham. It was all his fault.
Okay, so or Robbie Williams, or
Yeah.
it sort of felt like it's something that happened sort of this century. It really sort of took off.
Mm.
Yeah, look, I just wonder at what point does this permissive culture where, and I like the term that Mark Waugh, the cricketer, used to say. He used to call them tough stickers, and it was a way to prove that you're tough, or you've got this hardness about you. But when you turn 18 and you're a skinny little 60 kilo young bloke, and you go down to the tattoo parlor and get a full arm sleeve, as almost a rite of passage, I just find it an odd thing. And I just don't know that if people are going to look back in time, that's one thing. Or here's where I was going with it. When the forced vaccination or the compulsory medicine thing happens, people will no longer be able to say they're scared of needles if their body is covered in tattoos.
Very good point, Jason. Very good point. Let me just tell you on the other thing you said about, like a tough sticker. When you see these people who are heavily tattooed, like there's nothing left to tattoo on, basically, I actually find that they're very gentle people. And so I actually think it's like armor,
Mm.
I really do. It's usually quite the opposite. And I can tell you from experience, having my tattoo on my lower back actually did make me scared of needles because I didn't realize at all how extremely painful it is. I mean, you're essentially having several quite sensitive and full of nerve endings layers of skin, shaved off, right? It's extremely painful if you have a decent one done. So how these young people get these full sleeves is anyone's guess. But no, I was reasonably, as a mum, I was reasonably appalled by seeing that girl. Now, I think, in the future, when perhaps her dad has passed and it was her dad who took her to get that leg tattoo, she'll probably cherish it and think, this is something I did with dad. I just think it's very, very strange because also it's like this whole transition thing with kids. Kids want to do a lot of things that they see adults doing when they're kids, but when they grow up, they no longer want to do them. Right. And, I cut my hair off when I was 13 because I was sick of getting attention from boys. And then once I'd cut my hair off, I regretted it because people thought I was a boy when I was stood next to my brother. And thank God I wasn't alive now because they would have had me in, sex change therapy because they were like, yeah, she wants to be a boy. And thank God, because I had children and I breastfed them and I enjoyed that and wanted to do that. And, thank God I didn't, wasn't alive at this time in history. But I think it's strange. I feel like there was a clear boundary. We had these age limits where there was a difference between childhood and adulthood. And all of this stuff is kind of moving us into an era where there's not really a difference. And there has to be because childhood is so precious.
Well, that's where I would conclude this discussion by saying, let kids be kids. The idea that we learnt years ago, Drew Barrymore, the actress, was using cocaine and smoking, cannabis at the age of 11, 12 or 10 or something like that. We've seen photographs in the past of, children smoking cigarettes at, 6, 7 and 8. And like that was just something that people did back in the past. And all that was, of course, forbidden as we moved forward. So it was, kids were no longer allowed to smoke. But here we have a situation where and that became taboo, whereas now it's not taboo for a 9 or a 10-year-old to be taken to a tattoo parlor. And what does it say about the tattoo artist? Like, surely that person, if they're going to sort of stand on a moral high ground to sort of say, look, no, I draw the line there for whatever reason that you give, and you just walk away. But this particular character is just happy to sort of go along with it. And it's just an odd thing that you would do something permanent to a child, regardless of the attitude. I just find it a bridge too far, but it's a culture of permissiveness. And so therefore, even speaking about it is frowned upon, like I'm the bad guy, you're the bad guy for even bringing it up, which I think is just a pathetic cop-out excuse. Everything is entitled to be debated, especially when it comes down to how our children are grown up and are allowed, as we just said, to let kids be kids.
No, I think with the front line, we're both parents and there'll be lots of parents and grandparents listening to this. I think we're the front line and it's a constant battle and has always been a constant battle because there are those in society and yes, they're the ones we fear being around our children. They could end up being teachers. There was a teacher at a school here, a primary school down the road who was recently arrested in the middle of the day in front of children, small children, because, he's found to be collecting child pornography of the age of the children he was teaching as a primary school teacher, because there are those in society who seem to think it's some kind of game or it's some kind of turn on for them to sort of rip innocence from children. And this is all part of it, right? It's the age-old slippery slope. And I think it's important that we speak out on it. And I think those of us who are considered old school, who think protecting childhood is a good thing, we need to be brave. If they call you too conservative or far right, too bad. You're not any of those things. You're just a parent who's concerned. Now, Jason, I'm sure like every other day, we've got masses of headlines and bulletins. Shall we jump onto those?
Yeah, let's get into it right now. Treasurer Jim Chalmers will hand down his pre-election federal budget Tuesday, promising meaningful and substantial cost of living relief for struggling Aussies while seeking to avoid fueling inflation with cash handouts. Labor's fourth budget is likely to contain few surprises since really it was the budget we weren't supposed to have, with the arrival of ex-tropical cyclone Alfred earlier this month, scuppering Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's plans to call the election for the weekend of April 12. Chalmers tempered expectations for huge announcements, but said responsible cost of living relief would once again be a key theme. The budget is tipped to show a cash deficit of $26 billion and revenue downgrades of $11 billion over the next 4 years. After posting Australia's first budget surplus in 15 years, Chalmers confirmed Monday that the budget would be back in the red amid domestic and global headwinds. Treasurer has rolled out billions of dollars in new spending in recent weeks, including changes designed to provide relief for families through cheaper medicines and GP visits, cuts to student HECS debt, and a reduction in beer excise for schooners at the pub, or we should say a prevention of CPI increases for 5 minutes. It follows a big injection of public funding for schools and childcare and a $150 energy rebate. It seems to be a reduction there of the $275 you were promised. Former Prime Minister John Howard has been out and campaigning in my seat of Patterson, where incumbent Meryl Swanson of Labor is under pressure to lose her seat. Interestingly, Meryl was texted all of us telling us that they'd be door knocking on Sunday, and when I was at the shops, I saw Meryl wandering around the shops. Good on you, Meryl. Howard dismissed suggestions that Mr Dutton was a Trumpy, or some have described him as Trump Light or Timu Trump. Please, you're not Trump anything, Dutton. Stop pretending. A Sydney woman charged after reports a novel that she'd written contained child abuse material. Police have seized a copy of the novel to be forensically examined, as the 33-year-old has been charged with producing child abuse material. And the New South Wales Police said investigations began in March following reports of this particular fiction novel containing the child abuse material, and around 12:30 p.m. on Friday, detectives attended a home in the Western Sydney suburb of Quakers Hill where they arrested a 33-year-old woman. The Queensland government has accepted that a $7 billion deal with Canberra to fund the 2032 Olympic venue cannot be topped up, sounding the death knell of the showpiece Brisbane Arena. A $750 million green hydrogen project in South Australia has been quietly shelved, adding to a string of projects failing to move beyond a feasibility stage. DNA testing firm 23andMe has filed for bankruptcy as demand dries up. Co-founder and CEO Anne Wojcicki, ex-wife of Google founder Sergey Brin and sister of the late Susan, who was Google's first marketing manager, who once led YouTube, has quit after multiple failed buyout bids. The company's market value peaked in 2021 at nearly $6 billion amid booming interest in DNA testing kits, but demand has waned in recent years, hurting firms such as 23andMe and its Blackstone-owned rival Ancestry DNA. What does that tell you? In 2023, hackers exposed the personal data of nearly 7 million 23andMe customers over a 5-month period, dealing a major blow to the company's reputation and compounding its growth problems. The breach raised alarm among customers concerned about their privacy of how DNA testing firms handle their data. The San Francisco-based firm has laid off 200 employees and stopped development of all therapies as part of what will be a major overhaul. Wojcicki has been pushing for a buyout since last April, but was rebuffed by the 23andMe board. The company did not say where there were other interested bidders. It will continue to operate during the sale process, having secured $35 million in financing at the weekend. Congressman Jim Jordan has announced the House Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing to grill Judge James Boasberg next week over his activist injunctions and political history. Boasberg was the judge who ordered the return to the US of criminals from Venezuela and El Salvador. He just reaffirmed a ruling today that blocks President Trump from using wartime powers to summarily deport alleged gang members. The new development from the US District Judge Boasberg came just hours in advance of a critical courtroom showdown before a federal appeals court on Trump's deportation authority. Boasberg said legal precedents are clear that even if Trump's invocation of the 200-year-old statute is valid, the people subject to it are entitled to a meaningful opportunity to dispute their deportation by presenting evidence, for instance, that they are not members of a gang. This is an out-of-control judge, a federal judge trying to control our entire foreign policy, Pam Bondi, Attorney General, said on Fox Business Sunday. He's trying to ask us about national security information, which he's absolutely not entitled to. It's basic public safety. Get these people out of our country as fast as we can. Now, Boasberg was the same judge who ruled on the Pfizer case that allowed the FBI to surveil the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency, and for who FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith altered a document to convince the judge to grant said surveillance. Kleinsmith was the only person convicted in the John Durham investigation into the origins of the case, pleading guilty and then sentenced by Boasberg. Kleinsmith is back working in Washington, D.C. as a lawyer today. Police find multiple incendiary devices placed at a Tesla showroom in Austin, Texas. Meanwhile, Tesla shares have risen 20% since failed VP Tim Walz candidate celebrated the stock dropping. And in tariff news, Hyundai will announce a $20 billion investment in the US later today, including $5.8 billion for a steel plant in Louisiana. Rolls-Royce is planning to shift production to the US to avoid the Trump tariffs, reports Breitbart. Trump's statement on Venezuela: starting on April 2, 2025, Liberation Day in America, the US will impose a 25% secondary tariff on any country buying oil or gas from Venezuela. Trump says Venezuela deliberately sends tens of thousands of violent criminals, including the terrorist-designated Tren de Aragua gang, into the US. Former US Rep. Mia Love, the first black woman elected to Congress as a Republican, has passed away following a fight with an aggressive form of brain cancer. Her family announced on Sunday night. Love, who was 49, represented Utah's 4th congressional district from 2015 to 2019. She was diagnosed in 2022. She became a contributor to CNN in 2019. In North Carolina, a mother and her son can sue a public school system and a doctors group for allegedly giving the boy a COVID-19 vaccine without consent. The state Supreme Court has ruled. The ruling, handed down Friday, reverses a lower court decision that a federal health emergency law prevented Emily Happel and her son Tanner Smith from filing a lawsuit. Both a trial judge and the State Court of Appeals had ruled against the two, who sought litigation after Smith received an unwanted vaccine during the height of the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, The Guardian has published an article. The goal is to disassemble public health, experts warning against the US turn to vaccine skepticism. How about that? So that is wrapping up our news for today. I've got a lot more to talk about in terms of Kleinsmith and some other big stories there, Nicola. But I think that we're seeing now that there is an absolute information war that is going on here, and it's on all of the same issues. But here we are at the forefront, and we are going to have our own debate within the debate itself.
Yeah, it's interesting that Tesla is receiving, so much terrorism really in the USA, because Teslas do really well in Australia under the left-leaning Labor government. I mean, Teslas are kicking it here. They're doing really well. So it's quite strange that that's happening. I feel like that's agenda-driven. But I just wanted to touch on quickly this 23andMe and Ancestry.com and all of these companies that came along, interestingly, in the decade pre-pandemic, where they grabbed your DNA and, they'll likely go off to these firms, these labs in San Francisco, and, you just don't know what they do with them. But what's interesting about that is that, there's this habit now, this thing that people have been sold on of saving everything into the cloud. And it's so sweet and it's sold as such a great thing, right? You just put all your stuff in the cloud and we keep it there. The cloud is a building in Sacramento, California. The cloud is various buildings in Silicon Valley. So you're essentially handing all of your private photos, photographs of your children, your life, your home, everything that's private and personal and precious to you, to a group of people in a building, and you really don't know what they do with it. So I would encourage people to think more carefully about, I've never saved anything into the cloud. Even when I write books and I just save it on the laptop, it's constantly harassing me after every page. Are you sure you don't want to put it in the cloud? Are you sure you don't want to send it to the cloud? Why would I be writing down a book, an original idea, and want to hand it over to a stranger? No, thank you very much. Now, this interesting thing with regard to Trump and wartime laws to remove gang members, something really dark is going on here, where there's a movement to want to keep criminals in countries. The very famous British, infamous, I guess, British funeral director, John O'Looney, actually posted yesterday on X, and I saw it briefly. And he said that he's got a civil servant who is about, in the next 24 hours, he's going to break ranks. And he wants to alert the public to the fact that the UK government paid him to seek out five-star hotels in the London area that would house internationally known paedophiles and child killers who were going to be brought to the UK. Now, obviously, this hasn't played out and we haven't seen this person speak yet. I'm imagining he will be speaking sort of incognito in the shadows. I would certainly advise that. But it's almost like a plan, isn't it, to bring and then keep legally using law very dangerous people into our countries. And I guess you have to ask yourself why, Jason.
It can only be at this stage that they are determined to destroy everything that we've known in our culture and then somehow try and provide us the solution. But anything that searches to destroy is satanic.
Yeah.
So this defines what is a spiritual war. And I think that's what we're learning here. Now, I want to then go and look at this Judge Boasberg character. So he's a guy who thinks he's the president of the United States, who is deliberately blocking anything that Trump does. And he seems to be the go-to guy on exactly what's happening. So therefore, you have to ask the question, what would make them always go to Boasberg? And how is it that the presiding judge in charge keeps granting these cases to Boasberg? So therefore, you've got to ask questions of whoever is, when you go with a court and you lodge documents, someone's got to distribute that amongst the judges in that particular area. So therefore, that person comes under question. So are these people compromised, or are they just willing participants? And this is something we brought up last week, but I just want to provide you with a little bit more information about this Kevin Kleinsmith and Judge Boasberg. This is historic. This is in 2021. Kevin Kleinsmith was the former FBI attorney. He was 38 years of age, and he received the sentence of 12 months probation and 400 hours community service from the US District Court Judge James Boasberg during a video hearing. Didn't even have to turn up in the court. Kleinsmith admitted that in June 2017, so this is after President Trump is now the president, he sent an altered email to an FBI agent that indicated a target of court-ordered FBI surveillance former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page was not a source for the CIA. The statement passed along as the FBI was applying for a third extension of surveillance of Page, made Page's actions seem more suspicious by downplaying his past cooperation with the CIA. Now, the purpose, before I go on, of him saying that he was not a source implied that he was a Russian spy, but he was actually working for the CIA, or had in the past. So therefore, Page was a plant in the Trump campaign. So therefore, it was a conspiracy to put him in there. Kleinsmith insisted, ready for this, this is just mind-blowing. Kleinsmith insisted that he thought the statement was true at the time and only altered the message to save himself the hassle of procuring another email from the CIA. What a load of bullshit.
I mean, it's out of control. It's all out of control, Jason, right?
But you're ready for this. It gets better. I've got another paragraph to read. It's going to be mind-blowing. Prosecutors contested the claim, arguing that the FBI lawyer intended to mislead his colleague, but Boasberg sided with the defense on that point. Listen to this one. This is Boasberg, a quote from the judge. This is the same judge that's knocking down Trump on the 200-year Alien Act law, sending criminals back to the US. Here it is. My view of the evidence is that Mr. Kleinsmith likely believed that what he said about Mr. Page was true.
Oh.
By altering the email, he was saving himself some work and taking an inappropriate shortcut.
Oh my God. Isn't it sort of, isn't that fraud though? Couldn't that be considered fraud, doctoring emails and stuff like that? I mean, if that was done by Trump or someone in his administration, that would be as big as January the 6th, right? It would be huge.
Well, let's look at this. He's altered a document. Why they did this was to circumvent the argument that there was intent to alter the document for a clandestine purpose, which is what he did. It's obvious. This is the cover-up. And if he altered the document to deliberately use a plant to spy on the Trump campaign, he goes down for treason.
Yeah.
And whoever gave the order goes down for treason. And guess who gave the order?
Who?
Barack Hussein Obama.
Oh my God.
This is what we've been arguing for since
Yeah.
2007. This is where you got 25,000 citizen journalists who became citizen journalists because of this case and this particular evidence.
So the
And
judge is actually protecting Barack Obama in that instance, not this individual, because he knows this individual was working for him.
now, when I talk about military tribunal, this is because of the Q movement. The Q movement hadn't come out until October of 2017, and the Q movement said that the only way will be military tribunals because the judges are corrupt. And that's why I point to that particular argument. And it seems to be that the Q movement is the one that's forwarding the process of how they're going to have to deal with these corrupt judges. So literally, this is why I point to treason. So the only reason you can actually bring the military in is when you have active treason being played out in real time, and we are almost at that point. We are almost at that point.
I thought the justice system and the law was in place to provide justice. Call me a silly old fool, but I thought that was the whole premise of a justice system in any of our countries. So they're perverting the course of justice, which
Correct.
is actually a crime. So they're perverting it. It's clearly fraud. It's a whole bunch of other things as well. And again, it's about who these people are working for. I mean, it proves, unequivocally that Barack Obama is deep state and he's working against the country and the will of the people, and that he still has control of so many of these people. It's just staggering to me. And this stuff goes on behind the scenes, and we sort of know about it because it's America, right? It seems to get out. But I wonder how much of this kind of thing goes on in Australia, and we're just not aware of it, Jason.
Well, you would have to think that there is an element around, but nothing as high profile because we don't have an outside prime ministerial candidate. We don't have a third party with 20% support or better, and a charismatic leader who is able to engage the people and wander around. When you look back historically at the last 5 years, many people thought that that person was the man that sounded like Obama, looked like G.I. Joe, and he's named Ricardo Bosi. Many people thought that he was going to be our charismatic leader through the Australia One non-political party was going to get there. Unfortunately, Bosi, disappointed a lot of people and got no traction, and if anything, was self-destructive. And of course, the Voice campaign was probably where he became irrelevant. Others.
Why did he want? Did he want? Yes.
No. Bosi, he was campaigning on abstinence from voting. He said, "Do not vote."
Oh, right. Remove your own democracy. Yeah, not too bright. Yeah.
And so many people said, well, hang on a second, this thing could change to a yes. If I don't vote, I'm technically supporting the yes vote. And,
Well, thank goodness. Thank goodness, because I rallied for
yeah,
people to vote no, so much so they put me on the news. So I'm really glad. I didn't know that was going on at the time. My goodness, I would have commented on that had I known that. But I don't watch. I don't watch much of his broadcast. There are some people it's nothing to do with what they're saying. Even there's some quite well-known, fantastic people in independent media, and I know I see they're trying to do the right thing. They're also trying to earn money, and they're trying to sell people gold and all kinds of different things. But there's just something about their voice. There's something about when people feel very militant and very aggressive and very dramatic, and they make it so salacious that I felt many of them were sort of adding to this fear that was being clearly generated by governments. And so I thought, well, I don't agree with the fact that you're trying to frighten people. Some of it felt like incitement to violence. And so I thought, well, you're on a bit of a tightrope there, and I just found them hard to listen to. So I didn't listen to them too much, but I definitely listened to the people of Australia and what they wanted. And I was contacted by people from the Indigenous community, and they said, hang on, this Voice thing is a fraud. It's nothing to do with us. And so that's the route that I took.
and certainly more than valid. And it was one, or certainly a major argument. And of course, there are others. Look, history's now proven that it's 61 to 39. roughly what 6-4, 3-2.
I'm surprised they
50%.
don't do it again like Brexit. Just have another one because they didn't believe the outcome. That's what they did with
Well,
Brexit.
absolutely, it's like they're doing in Romania by not liking the election result, to calling
Mm.
another one, and then putting and then charging the leader with a crime. It's what they did with Imran Khan in Pakistan.
It's like,
That's
oh
a
dear, this guy's not corrupt. We can't control him. We must ensure he doesn't get in. It's literally that. Obviously across our globe, democracy is sort of a historic notion now because these people are charging ahead. I mean, when you look at anything, literally anything, that horrid Ursula von der Leyen, who's not voted in again by anyone, very much like our Premier in Victoria, Jacinta Allen, when she starts talking about what she's going to do with this digital euro and Divock, it's like, no one voted for her. The other members of the European Parliament were voted in by the people, and she just goes in and overrides them. So where's the democracy, Jason?
There's none. It's like Mark Carney in Canada. At least he thinks he's on a winner with the tariff thing in Canada. But he's to call an early election 6 months ahead of schedule. But so they've had a bounce in their polling numbers. It's likely not to get any better, and he's decided to go now or never, in that regard. Now, I'll just backtrack. I mentioned Imran Khan before, and I think it's important again to paint a picture of just how far the tentacles of the deep state operate. So Imran Khan was one of the greatest ever cricketers in history. He was a playboy, virtual movie star. He was married to Jemima Goldsmith, which is an interesting one, that a Muslim man would marry a Jewish woman.
Wasn't he associated with Princess Diana briefly as well?
Yes, I think so. Before Dodi Fayed came into
Yeah,
the scene, there was,
briefly. Mm.
briefly, and of course now he's married to a Muslim woman. He's devout, obviously, and will only live in Pakistan. He was offered exile and he refused. He said, "I'll serve my time in prison," even though there's no reason he should be in prison. So anyway, when the Ukraine-Russia war was emerging, US was looking for support from all of the countries like they do with this coalition of the willing that they did back in 9/11. And what they did was they reached out to all these different countries, and Imran Khan had taken it upon himself as the Prime Minister of Pakistan to have a conversation with Vladimir Putin. So the US government wrote to the Pakistani parliament and demanded that they would get a certain outcome from Pakistan. And they didn't want Imran Khan having anything to do with it because Imran basically wanted to stay neutral. That was his take. He wasn't going to be pro-Ukraine. He just wanted to get the facts and stay neutral. So suddenly, like they do in Pakistan, no prime minister's ever served a full term. They all get thrown out for corruption one way or another. They get framed.
Oh, for God's sake.
There was every single day there was another case and another arrest of Imran Khan, and there were riots in the streets, etc. Because Imran Khan is beyond a hero in that country, beyond.
How long is he locked up for?
Well, we're talking years and years, but they convicted him on false pretenses and locked him up, and then they reversed them. But there's one particular charge. Now, here's the point. The one charge that they got him down for was he held up a piece of paper and he said, "This document proves that the US government coerced the Pakistani parliament through a what do you call it, a telegram or whatever they call those, the things that you get in embassies, that what they wanted to do to silence us." So what happened? The Pakistani Department of Justice charged Imran Khan with revealing the contents of a classified document.
But he held it up and no one saw it, but he was threatening to share it. Right. This is again, it proves that none of us are in democracies, right? Because as soon as we get even a whiff of finding out the truth, the hammer comes down. People get locked up. Look at Julian Assange. We got a whiff of the truth about what was really going on, particularly, with the Clintons. And so shut him up. I always say they want you to sit down and shut up. Right. They don't want you to know how they're really running this place because they don't really represent you. They're just giant criminal cartels. And so that's just another example of it. And America really has to butt out of other countries. I lived in America for 7 years. I love Americans. I think they're wonderful people. But these American administrations need to butt out. I mean, the fact that we've got it on film, Joe Biden saying he'd hold back that $1 billion for Ukraine unless they fired their attorney general. who was investigating. I mean, you know, you're operating when other people, when independent groups do this, we call them terrorists. But when
Mm.
America does it, you know, we're trying to encourage democracy in Ukraine. What's going, you know, there's only so long we can eat shit politely, right? That's not what's
Mm.
going on here. They want, it seems like the deep state of America want global totalitarian control, and they're clearly in bed with these scary people in the EU like Ursula von der Leyen, clearly.
Again, and part of a globalist movement. And this is the point that people who will eventually catch on have to start asking questions. Why? What is the agenda? What is this globalist agenda? And of course, on the left, you will always see, and this is reflected in this Guardian article today that I mentioned in the headlines, where they're coming out trying to pin vaccine skepticism on the US like it's a bad thing. So what you get is you get a bunch of happy clapping lefties reading along, going, yeah, they're just skeptics, and RFK's a lunatic conspiracy theorist, and they're all idiots. Well, hang on a second. You guys are the idiots because you believe all the bullshit that you read and you're told. So what it is, this is a perfect example of the age of Pisces vertical dissemination of information hierarchy. And what the age of Pisces is flipping at 90 degrees, and it becomes a horizontal dissemination of information. There is no hierarchy anymore.
Yeah, but
Everyone has
because of
access to all
that,
information.
Jason, because of that, because we're getting all the information, that's the reason they want programmable money and digital IDs, because they know that we're about to find out the truth of all of them. They're all being exposed. That's what everything's about. That's what we end up with, the same conclusion on this radio show, you know, every single day and every single week. We
Hmm.
are now finding out the truth about the corruption, the totalitarianism, the terrorism, the stuff that goes on in the name of democratic governments globally.
Hmm.
And so they know that there are going to be people out there who don't agree with it, who resist, who want to bring it down, who want to remove their power and authority. Well, actually, they don't have authority over us, right? And so that's why they want all this, because they want to know who we are and where we are before we find out who they are and where they are. And that's where we're heading, Jason.
Well said. So we are in an information war, and therefore we are in an information race. So what we've been able to do as citizen journalists is we've been able to learn on the run, as I said yesterday, autodidacts, and teach ourselves how to become citizen journalists, to become, and then to be promoted, to be self-promoted to independent journalists. And that's why I talked about the importance of becoming professional. And the reason that you have to become professional is so that you can dedicate yourself full time, so that you can actively compete against a corrupt mainstream system. Because in this race, we have to provide the best quality information. We have to provide the best digestible presentations of our work, so that more and more people will come to it, more and more people will comment, more and more people will share, and eventually it becomes a going concern. So park that there for the moment. This is another interesting story in development. So we know about Conor McGregor, the fighter from Ireland, who's just announced that he's going to be running for president. So a week ago, they were mocking him. They were saying that he's got no hope and he's an idiot and all the usual things. Well, now that he's announced, they've gone into a tailspin, because he's instantly popular and he presents something that the Irish would absolutely like to get behind, and it's a breath of fresh air against a system being strangled by the globalists. So here's the breaking news. Ireland's Director of Public Prosecutions is now considering charging Conor McGregor with incitement to hatred for posts he made on X back in 2023. And if
Oh.
convicted, he faces up to 2 years in jail. And the writer says this is Trump-style political persecution and election interference. It's the same old playbook. So now we understand. I know that we bark a lot at our audience and ask them to get involved and do what they're doing. But what we're really doing is educating, and that is our job. It's up to the political movements separately, to which we're allowed to be involved with, and we both are, more or less in one way or another, because we realise that it's one thing to tell the information, it's another thing to lead by example and to get out there, boots on the ground, and do it, whether we're candidates or handing out for others or just getting involved or facilitating whatever we can do and whatever we can do. But I've noticed that in the 6 years of being in front of a camera, compared to when I started from my bedroom reporting COVID stats to where I am today, I've certainly improved. And I tell you what, I think I can hold my own against most journalists out there. And the thing is that we are what we might be in the news world as general practitioners. We're across everything. whereas other journalists specialize in certain areas. So we're learning at a rate of knots. So that doesn't mean that I can be as good as, I don't know, some great journalist that's out there that specialises, let's say Kate McClymont in the Sydney Morning Herald as an investigative journalist. I'm not saying I'm going to put myself up against Kate in terms of an investigation into a particular thing, but that lady spends 6 months on one story. We talk about 25 stories a day, so we can't be considered the same thing.
Yeah,
So
well, we're pushed for time, so we have to do a bit of everything. So the president in Ireland, that's what they call the Taoiseach, right? He's going for the Taoiseach, and that is a very influential position, right? Now, Ireland has been geographically very important for this globalist movement, right? Because look at what they're doing to Ireland with the migrants. I mean, they're really going through it. I shared on my X account yesterday. By the way, my X account is all bite, no bark 88, and Jason's is Jason Q Citizen 1. I shared a horrifying piece of footage. I think it was from the UK of a young woman, and there's a picture of her, and she's being beaten and kicked and assaulted by a migrant gang of females, I think. And they are saying to kill her because she's white. And it's worse than that, but you can clearly see it in the footage. And this is the thing, right? They've erected this surveillance state, and I wonder what they've erected it for. Because a lot of this violence to the OGs, domestic populations, by these migrants globally are now being caught on camera. Where's the command center? Who's watching this? Someone's sitting back in a boardroom with their feet up on the big long table, smoking a cigar and laughing. Because if these cameras cannot bring criminals to justice, what exactly are they there for? It's starting to feel perverse because a lot of this violence and these attacks are being caught on camera. And even if they do manage to identify people and they end up in court, as you say, people are getting suspended sentences. And yet there'd be, single parents who've clicked the wrong button on a Centrelink payment, and then Robodebt comes along and they're doing 2 years in jail, right? And all they did was claim the wrong entitlement, right? So how come violence being caught on the surveillance state, because there isn't anywhere where we're not on camera now, how come it isn't bringing these people to justice? It's obvious that no one actually gives a crap that we're all getting attacked.
isn't it interesting? Because then you have a selective justice, two-tier justice system. When you think, hang on a second, how can these severe crimes go unpunished? And so people will then argue, well, they're big crimes, so they take a lot of evidence, and they haven't got enough to get you over the line. But something as simple as driving your car and having your seatbelt slightly off your shoulder.
Yeah.
And photographs taken, and you get a $500 fine, and you lose 3 to 5 points off your license.
Well, think about that.
You can't even argue it.
Think about that bit of footage from Trump's first administration, and there was a photo shoot of international leaders, right? And it always makes me laugh when I see it. And Trump pushed a couple of people out the way to get to the front, and he's quite tall. So tall people normally go at the back. I know that. I was always tall at school, and I was always made to stand in the back row because I was tall, and it used to really tick me off. But anyway, Trump just got his hand and kind of push through the crowd, right, to get to the front because he felt he was really important. And there was absolute global outrage that he put his hands on these other international leaders to get to the front. But there's no global outrage when people are literally kicking the shit out of young people and in our countries claiming that they want them dead because they're white. That's okay. You get a suspended sentence and you don't end up in the newspapers. You may note that our corrupt establishment media is not reporting on all this violence. Have you noticed in Australia and in the UK, they're not really reporting on it. The only people who are reporting on it are YouTubers and TikTokers. And that's how we're knowing about it. It's not on the news, and I find it absolutely outrageous. These people have clearly been brought in to attack us. That's what's going on. If they're happy with it and they're not jailing them, then they've been brought in to do that, right?
There is no other argument, is there? And what the news doesn't cover, an error of omission, is exactly what we're witnessing. So
And Jacinta Allen, the unelected Premier of Victoria, she's just adjusted the bail laws and she's gone on all the radio shows. And when you're on radio now in Australia, obviously there's cameras there. It's very much like a podcast and she's being filmed. And you can see that she's so insincere and she's very like Albo. She's just lying and she's going, I've decided I'm going to be very tough on these bail laws. Well, what that means is that you just get more money. That's what that means. It doesn't mean you stop these people. It means you get them to put more hard, cold cash down in order to get their bail and their freedom, which does what? Puts them back out on the streets. So that if they do abscond, oh, well, the government just made some more money. How does that keep people safer, for crying out loud?
There you go. Well, we know the answer, don't we? That it's not about keeping us safe. We are the puppets in the system, but the people collectively hold all the power. And it's the reason why we're being censored and controlled is because they know that once we work it out, the jigger's up and the people win. And that's where we are on this program. We are divided between two narratives, the end of civilization as we know it, or the species itself, or should we be able to break through the greatest leap forward in all of human history? And that's why we talk about last week, we talked about the discovery of the $5.7 trillion iron ore deposit, which alone, if was shared amongst the people, would represent $220,000 each person.
God, that's a lot. That is such a lot of money.
That's the point. And this is what I say to people, like the average household family would be, what, 4, 3? Let's say it's 4. Or even 3.5, you'd be handed the equivalent of $750,000. Now, that would be enough to pay off virtually everyone's mortgage in virtually every capital city.
That's the first thing I thought. Yeah, pay off your mortgage. You'd be
just off one iron ore deposit. One.
Yeah. So, but whose is it? Who are they deeming it belongs to? The greedy grubberment, and they either give it away or sell it. Who does it belong to?
Well, generally, it's a mineral resource owned by the country. And what they do is that they lease the land, people pay a lease price, and then you have shareholders in the operation to extract it.
But why aren't there greenies on the street with posters saying, leave our iron ore alone, like, leave it in the ground, leave nature alone while you're selling it off? Why don't they care about that stuff, these greenies, these climate protesters?
Isn't it interesting that? And not only that, but I wonder what a greenie would do if you said to a greenie, now listen, you guys also benefit in this one thing. And what we're saying to you is, understand what you're dealing with here, but we can take away all of your financial problems to get you into a home and to get you comfortable so that you can do whatever it is you want to do and never be beholden to a system that ultimately you're not happy with. And
I think they'd be lonely without the fight, Jason. I really do.
And so there's the next thing point. So are these people just contrarians? Are they just antagonists, or are they? Do you know what I'm trying to say here? Like, at what point are we going to unify? Now, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and this is for the entire audience. On my screen right now, I'm looking at an image, a video, a 9-second video that's on loop, of the great Greta Thunberg on a street with a microphone and her phone in her hand, walking in front of a Volkswagen utility that's obviously a diesel, not an EV, and certainly not a Tesla, and she's wearing the Palestinian keffiyeh, the scarf, right? So she's in a pro-Palestinian rally. So those people that are anti-Israel for this moment, are you now a Greta Thunberg supporter? But I'm going to throw this curveball at you. This Palestinian keffiyeh came to the region of Palestine during the British Mandate from Iraq, where a similar version is worn, with the black slightly more dominant, and the word itself comes from the fabled Iraqi city of Kufa. So it's not even a Palestinian
I'll tell you what
dress.
she is. I'll tell you what she is. She's a mercenary. So a mercenary is someone who is paid handsomely to cause a problem. She's also an agitator. That's part of her job description. So she is there to keep us fighting each other right? So initially she did it with climate, and the fact that she's been moved sideways, it's like a
Mm,
sideways promotion. We're just going to put you in a different department. We're now going to put you in Israel versus Palestine, right?
mm,
That's
mm.
absolutely nuts. And she's just proven that she is worthless and dishonorable. And how this young person, very young person, was ever listened to, that famous clip where she's going, "How dare you?" Well, I would
Yes.
like to say back to you, Greta, how dare you ruthlessly be a mercenary? I've seen her run down the street in the snow in Davos in her little beanie with no makeup on, looking super cute, and she knows what's right for all the people and all the planet. God, she must be a nightmare to be around. And what did she do? She hopped into a massive 5 liter gas guzzling BMW limousine and was sped off into the night. They're just hypocrites, and it is all theatre, and it is a giant play, and it's all scripted, right? What she's doing there is completely scripted. I'm an actress. I know all about scripted scenes and scenarios, and that's what she was. And they've even, it's been proven, people have stepped back and taken photographs and footage of her, the setup of her being arrested and police taking her backpack off her and everything when she was a climate so-called activist, but really she was a mercenary. And then, the take didn't go well. So the police give her backpack back and then set her back up in the scene, and like they go for a second take. So don't ever tell me that Greta Thunberg is not a mercenary. She's someone that if we lived in a truly just world would be in jail. She incites violence, and I thought incitement to violence was a crime. Okay, we've reached the end of the show, Jason. What would you like to say before we go?
I'm going to give you a quick 30-second final story to sum up what we've just talked about. So John Leake, who works with Peter McCullough, an Australian, I believe, has written a Substack article today, and he's talking about Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, who spoke of a call to action to call organised for people to take down Tesla, and she was saying that she wanted to celebrate her birthday on March 29th, and all she wanted to see happen on her birthday was for Elon Musk to be taken down. That was the quote. So John Leake has written, Jasmine Crockett is apparently acting as an agent provocateur, though she may not be fully aware that she is being used as such. I suspect she is being instructed to make such inflammatory statements with the objective of forcing Attorney General Pam Bondi to arrest her for inciting violence. So what he's insinuating here is that this is part of a step to create the next George Floyd riots to be absolutely destructive. So if that's the case, we are dealing with a satanic plot using stupid, young, impressionable congresswoman who has tickets on herself. She's a Democrat from Texas. She's a very attractive lady with a very big mouth. And so she's going to be the darling of the Democrats, a bit like AOC. And it's kind of like the Democrats' version of Trump's Charlie's Angels, all these magnificently beautiful women in these incredibly impressive
The
women.
squad.
Well, they had the squad, and then Trump one-upped them by everyone that he employed is off the cover of Vogue magazine and all have credentials as long as your arm. So now there's a new way coming through. It's just interesting again. Politics, as described to me, is the show business of ugly people, but it seems that they're getting a little bit better looking as they go along here. So it's becoming the new Hollywood, if you will. So my comment there is we are doing our best for you, the listener and the viewer, for what we're trying to do here. We are working our backsides off to bring you a news show that is unlike anything else. I am thrilled and delighted to serve, and I'm even more thrilled and delighted with the feedback, and I thank you for supporting our show.
And very briefly, Jason, tell us about your new endeavor. You have a new show where we can see you and watch you chatting. Tell us very, very quickly what that's about.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to do an interview on Jamie McIntyre's Australian National Review, which he's relaunching. Jamie set that newspaper up back in 2013, and at the conclusion of the interview, he offered me a show. He said, "I'd love you to come and do a show for us on the platform. It can be about anything that you want. I'd like you to do an hour a week." So
Fantastic. So where can we find that? On your X account?
Well, it will be shared on X and on other platforms. I've decided to call the show the 51st State. I'm recording my first show today, and on it, I'm always going to try and have an Australian guest of prominence and an American guest. I have Russell Broadbent joining me for the first half, and And the second half of the show, I have US attorney and former Trump observer in terms of all the election fraud, Dave Shostokis, joining me from Chicago to discuss the lawfare that's going on against Trump right now. So,
Wonderful.
and then we'll be able to draw some conclusions from there. And so it's going to be a big deal. I'm thank you for asking, and I'll share that out there so you get to see me as well as hear me. And I'm really looking forward to being able to work across, and that's what I think we all need to do, is to work across as many platforms as we can. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin, but be able to contrast the different types of work that we're doing. And at the end of the day, like politics, the independent media must consolidate one way or another. You're going to like some of us, you're not going to like some of us, however it works. But that once we start to sort of centralize and cooperate, we will become that dominant force. So full thank you for Jamie McIntyre for backing this, for funding it, and for introducing a brand new model to be able to share this information. And let me tell you, we don't all agree on that platform. There are people there that are the exact opposite of me. So again,
Good.
Controversial and good. Thank you.
Good.
For asking.
Well, congratulations, Jason. That's fantastic and interesting. You're speaking with Russell Broadbent, because I'm doing a speech with him this Sunday at 10:30 at the Traralgon Lawn Bowls Club. And so that will be interesting. If you can get down there, you can see me live sounding off about everything that's going on. So thank you again for listening to the Daily Australian with myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host and co-producer. Hopefully he won't be headhunted into oblivion, Jason Olborn. We will do this all over again tomorrow.